Dude, where's our psyker? Part 2. So, no shit, there we were. On a naval boarding shuttle, on our way to capture a rogue trader and his retinue from a ship filled with captive psychers. We were not exactly enthusiastic about our odds of survival. Rogue traders have a reputation for being, or at least employing, very scary people. Plus, an entire ship of untrained psychers was a terrifying thought. Ours were bad enough alone. Still, we were Guardsmen. Facing certain death for unappreciative superiors is what being a Guardsman is all about. None of us really enjoyed the shuttle trip. The pilot was clearly terrified, and the invasive news made us all nauseous. We half expected to be blown out of space before we got to the ship, but we landed on the hull without incident and caught our way into the interior. While we did this, several other Navy and all-body shuttles were doing likewise. This was not a subtle attack, so it was hardly surprising that before we got 10 feet in, the ship's alarms started to go off. We knew our business, though, and mowed down all opposition before they got a shot off on us. The assault was going well for all of the teams. We seized the engines and main batteries, the main hangars were on the verge of surrender, and the tech priest was pretty sure he located the bridge. Seizing the initiative, he remotely hacked all the entrances to lock open so they couldn't shut it against us. Unfortunately, those actually turned out to be the doors to the psychic isolation cells. The second he opened them, everything went to hell. Literally. Ghostly images filled the air, the frescoes on the walls started weeping blood, unearthly screamings that came from every direction, and a stench that put even Nubby's lack of hygiene to shame and emanated from the air vents. Our psychers moved forward to try and sort things out before the entire ship got sucked into the warp or something, but we wanted nothing to do with a section of spaceship filled with supernatural darkness and constantly fluctuating gravity. We still had a mission though, and since the psychic activity was blocking Vox communication, Sarge took operational command. We needed to get to the bridge, which the rather embarrassed tech priest assured us was definitely just a little further past the psyker holding area. Once there, we needed to find the rogue trader, subdue him, and hit him until he ratted on his buddies. The problem was that even though there were other passages to the bridge that didn't go through the psyker cells, the psychic spillover had turned that entire section of the ship into no man's land. Just walking in there would be suicide. But Sarge figured that there was a safe way to cross the hellscape if we only could find the right people. Sarge was pretty sure that any ship carrying a bunch of unhappy psychers would have at least one untouchable on board, just in case something like this happened. All we needed to do was find where they were and convince them to take a walk with us. So we had our tech priest do a quick scan to find out if any areas nearby weren't experiencing paranormal activity. Then we went to go knock on some doors. Sure enough, we found two untouchables hanging out in a cabin speculating on what all the fuss was about. One of them tried to make a fight of it and got shot for his trouble. But the other understood that in times like this, all men need to come together and serve the Emperor. So we cocooned him in duct tape, threw him over Heavy's shoulder, and set off for the bridge. The walk was really quite pleasant as long as you ignored the dents, stains, puddles, and complete absence of any living creature. We waltzed right up to the bridge without any opposition, and found it locked down tighter than a Sororitas convent when the guard was in town on leave. While the locked doors might have posed a problem for some of the other boarding groups, Nubby had helpfully attained several of the cutting tools that the shuttle crew had used to open up the outer hall. So, with the tech priest's help, we found a section of wall which was much thinner than the blast door and started cutting our way in. Sadly, even with a breaching charge to help with the final step, a las cutter is not quick or subtle. All we found on the bridge after we flashbanged the shit out of it and stormed in was a bunch of empty seats and a locked door labeled escape pods. We used the ship's box to contact the boss and explain the situation. After he was done bitching at us for the umpteenth time, especially the poor tech priest, he decided that given our lack of success, he would track the trader's escape pod instead of just blowing it out of the sky. We were to go get our damn psychers back and get ready to raid wherever the trader finally went to ground. So, with our duct-taped untouchable in tow, we went back into psychic no man's land and started sorting shit out. The DTU really trivialized everything. It was just a matter of walking up to the psychers, having Doc trank them, then tossing them onto the pallet Heavy was pushing. Occasionally, we'd run into a minor demon, or a crazed crew member, or an obvious demon host, but between the DTU and a liberal dose of last fire, nothing posed a real threat. We eventually collected all the surviving psychers. A few of them were inside out, freaking nut job, and found our 3 psychers a little worse for wear, but ready to go after the rogue trader as soon as we knew where he was going. Psychic phenomena count 23. Perils of the warp count 5. It's only going to get worse. The pallet full of sedated psychers were turned over to the all bodies along with the DTU. We were sad to see him go. He was like a big sticky teddy bear that kept us all safe and happy. But he had to stay with the psychers, so we had handed him over to the all bodies and headed for the shuttle. The interrogator boxed us with directions to pick up the assassin, who had spent the whole mission getting her nails done or something, and report to an all bodies precinct near some big government mansion. Our interrogator used his incredible skills and brilliant mind to track the rogue trader here, and also cleverly pinned Secretary such and such as the mastermind of this whole mess. Our job was to quietly go in and capture the secretary and rogue trader so they could be used by the Inquisition to sort this whole mess out without causing a massive scandal or minor war. So while the all bodies put up a very discreet perimeter, and the tech priests worked with some local engineers to quietly shut down the mansion's communications, the rest of our team planned our infiltrations. By this point, Sarge was done with everyone's shit and vetoed several complex ruses suggested by the assassin in face. Eventually, they just gave up, and the team was disguised as a group of heavily armed guardsmen and some very dangerously unstable psychers. These weren't exactly the best disguises, but we felt pretty sure that everyone could act their part. Grumbling about obstinate guardsmen and stupid plans, the rest of the team dressed themselves up as officers and good old-fashioned section psychers. For our part, we tacked on the insignia of a local regiment and caught some sleep while the rest got their costumes in order. When everyone was dressed up, we walked right through the mansion's security, pretending to be a local general dropping off some extra protection for his good friend, the secretary. The poor sod was out of his mind with panic. He was calling in every favor he had to fortify his mansion, and we fit right in with all the others. Our credentials weren't even checked. As soon as we claimed to be reinforcements, we were waved past security and let inside. He even invited the general up to his office to personally thank him for his generosity. We walked right into the secretary's office and presented ourselves with him while the rogue trader stood behind him and stared at us boggle-eyed. Nothing good can last forever, though, and after a few seconds of speechlessness, the rogue trader called the security a bloody idiot and opened fire. The rogue trader was a little late, though. By the time he drew his weapon, the assassin had grabbed the secretary and we had already killed several bodyguards. We signaled the all bodies to move in, grabbed some cover, and started a two-way firefight between the traitor and the security reinforcements. We had him well pinned and had started to flank him when the far door burst open and the traitor's retinue entered the fight. 2 of them were already glowing. Once again, we found ourselves stuck in the middle of a damned psycho duel. Meanwhile, the All-Bodies moved in to detain everyone, and without direct orders from the secretary, none of the security forces felt inclined to argue with the All-Bodies' APCs. Back inside, Heavy was mowing down reinforcements with his stubber, Twitch was nailing anyone who left cover, and the rest of us were steadily advancing on the traitor and his psychers. Surprisingly, the 2 enemy psychers were holding off all 3 of ours. Aside from a few phenomena, neither side appeared to be actually doing anything. Eventually, our slow advance got us a good shot on the traitor and his retinue, pushing the psychers to try something desperate. Phase collapsed, but one of the traitor's psychers burst into flame, taking a pair of retainers with him. In response, Nutjob and Snitch doubled down on the last psyker, until suddenly Nutjob fell to the ground screaming, and one of the last retainers did likewise. Suddenly, the retainer got to his feet and tackled the last enemy psyker to the ground and started beating the shit out of him while giggling. While we watched this, Nutjob got to his feet, drew his sidearm, and shot Heavy in the back of the head. A second shot was fired at Twitch, but a quick dodge saved him. Unfortunately, the second he stopped covering the traitor, a round hit him in the back. While this happened, Sergeant Nubby downed the last retainer and the traitor disappeared with a loud crack. Immediately afterward, the enemy psyker stopped moving. Doc ran towards Twitch and Heavy, and both the possessed retainer and Nutjob collapsed again. While Doc started patching up Twitch, Snitch collapsed in exhaustion, and Nubby headshot the psyker and the retainer that had been attacking him. Sarge scanned the room for the traitor, and with a tired giggle, Nutjob began to sit up. Immediately, the injured Twitch drew his sidearm and emptied an entire clip into the little bastard. No one commented on this. Sarge and Nubby slowly approached the door to the bathroom attached to the office. Right as they reached it, a voice from inside announced, "I would like to surrender to the Inquisition and put myself and my ship at their disposal in this current investigation." Both Sarge and Nubby ignored this and started prepping a breaching charge. Before they finished, they heard the assassin, who had been hiding with the secretary behind a filing cabinet, calm the interrogator and tell him that it had been captured and the traitor was surrendering. The interrogator ordered Sarge to accept the gentleman's surrender and escort him to the shuttle. With a weary sigh, Sarge removed the charge and relayed the message. After a few seconds, the rogue traitor opened the door and smugly declared, "I knew we could work together. This was just such a tragic misunderstanding." Whereupon Nubby yelled, "He's got a gun!" And Sarge blew his head off. The interrogator was not happy. That was the end of our part of the investigation. Doc got Twitch stable and patched everyone else up, while Sarge collected Heavy's body and Nubby looted the corpses. It was sort of awkward sitting there waiting for the all clear from the all bodies. The secretary was moaning and crying in a very annoying way, and the rest of the team kept shooting us death glares while they struggled to restrain him. We offered to help, but they refused us for some reason. The mood was not improved by Nubby making some truly horrific noises as he tried to pry something out of the traitor's corpse. In the end, he had to borrow Doc's Bonesar. Eventually, the all bodies finished clearing the mansion and a team escorted us back to their precinct. A flyer came and picked up the secretary along with the assassin, Snitch, and Face, and hauled him off to some secure facility somewhere. We weren't told anything, and we were definitely on the interrogator's shit list. Final psychic phenomena count, 28. Final perils of the warp count, 7. We hung out with the all bodies for a few hours, and they were nice enough to give us some food and help sew Twitch up while we waited. After a while, a shuttle came for us, as well as, to our surprise, the tech priest. The ride up was pretty somber. Heavy was dead, both his and Nutjob's corpses were in the hold, and we knew the interrogator was furious with us. Not even Nubby's jokes about the selling price of second-hand gold teeth or his reenactment of the rogue traitor's death could cheer us up. When we got back to the ship, we were treated to a long lecture about how our incompetence had ruined the interrogator's carefully laid plans. We were told how Sarge's disobedience had removed a vitally useful source of information, how our poor decision-making had killed a valuable teammate, and how the tech priest's mistake on the ship had jeopardized the entire mission. He also made several remarks about our general behavior, attitude, hygiene, and education. Then finally pointed out if only we had acted as professionally as the rest of the team, Heavy would still be alive. If the bastard didn't have remote control of the ship's security servitors, Sarge would have probably killed him. In the end, we were ordered to pack up and return to the shuttle. We would be returning to Oak's ship on a naval transport while the investigation was finished with the aid of the all bodies and the local AdMech. A secure data slate containing a summary of the investigation so far, as well as a detailed critique of our performance, was sent along with us. It came with a dire warning that Oak would be expecting the slate and any attempt to accidentally lose it would go poorly. So we packed up our gear in Heavy and boarded our shuttle. However, as a final afterthought, we propped Nutjob's corpse upright in the bathroom where it would hopefully scare the shit out of that damn interrogator. The trip back was a lot better than the trip out. None of the Navy boys bothered us, and we bonded with the tech priest over our mutual hatred for that bastard interrogator. So aside from Sarge's usual drools, we mostly lounged around and came up with ideas for how to change the report after the tech priest finished hacking the secure data slate. Few pieces of technology can risk a tech priest with a month of travel time on his hand. Before the trip was even half done, he had cracked it open and ready for a little judicious editing. There was a strong sentiment to wipe the whole thing and replace it with a picture of a butt and a note that said, blah, 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 I am a gigantic tool, blah, blah, blah. But cooler heads prevailed. We simply removed all negative references to ourselves from the report and rewrote the disciplinary note to simply say we were no longer needed and were released back to Oak. As an afterthought, we went through the entire report and dialed the interrogator's self-praise up to 11. We hoped it would help him come off as a complete tool to anyone who read the report. Eventually, we arrived back at Professor Oak's giant spacefaring inquisitorial school, which was currently orbiting some random agri-world. We dropped off the data slate, got debriefed, and went to find our fellow guardsmen. Sure enough, there were a few of them holding down the little section of the ship that we had claimed back when we arrived. We got together, shared some stories, and planned a suitable funeral for Heavy. We called up the tech priest and found our other Krog bro still hanging out in engineering, so we invited them both down to the planet with us. Then we got Heavy out of storage, requisitioned a shuttle, and headed down to the agri-world to give him a proper send-off. In the morning, the Krog bros helpfully hauled our hungover asses back onto the shuttle and got us back aboard before anyone noticed we had left. That done with, we settled in for a few well-deserved weeks of R&R. On some days, a squad would come back with tales of success or failure and occasionally missing a few men. Other days, a runner would come down and a squad would head out, or a new one would be pieced together. Eventually, our squad's R&R time ran out, so we packed our bags and waited for the runner to come for us. The runner didn't come, though. Instead, one day, as we lounged in our makeshift barracks, a tall man ducked into the room. He wore dress greens and positively reeked of officer. In a chipper voice, he greeted us and invited our squad and that strapping young fellow with the sword to join him on a little expedition. He said he was going to a combat zone and thought we would enjoy a chance to get back into action and solve a few little military problems that are right up our alley. What? And so, with a weary sigh, we gathered up the one man in the regiment dumb enough to prefer a sword over a good old-fashioned las gun and followed a new interrogator to the shuttle.